Overwatch is too hard. I don't mean that just picking up, playing, and understanding any one character is difficult. In fact, I think many of them are probably far too easy. The issues lie more with the game's systems and structures that really make the game far less intuitive than it needs to and frankly should be. Now, I don't want this to come off as I am just some random scrub who can't rank up. I don't really think that rank matters at all here, but I have been playing and coaching on organized teams for half a decade at this point, and that world is very different to the one that most people see on ladder. So I wanted to dedicate my time here to analyzing and potentially improving two specific difficulty pain points for your average player: learning the game and effective team play. So let's start at the beginning. How the hell are you supposed to figure out what you are actually supposed to do in this game? Overwatch is a unique blend of many genres and elements from them, with its own spice thrown in there as well. While this makes the game very dynamic and gives it such an interesting feel, you cannot base your playstyle solely on another type of game. You need good cooldown management and decision making like a MOBA. You need good positioning and mechanical skill like an FPS. You need good team building and coordination like in an MMO. And how does the game teach you to do all of these things? It doesn't. It doesn't like at all. It actually used to try to suggest characters for your team comp way back in the day, but that was never very helpful and has since been removed. Let's start off with the worst offender, the tutorial. Overwatch's tutorial's shortcomings have been dissected to death by plenty of creators, myself included, so I won't be diving into many of the specifics. All it does is show you how to control your character and their abilities, but doesn't give you any strategy or real guidance at all about how to use them. And I really can't blame the developers for doing this. Skipping the very large history lesson, Overwatch was developed from the bones of the MMO Titan, and there was no real direction for how the game was really going to play. They designed lots of character kits that they thought were interesting, and combined many different FPS influences all into one game. Basically, the team wasn't focused on how the game should play, they really wanted to get the design and feeling just right and release it onto the world. It is now our job to figure out how to play it and what to do with it. All that to say, they didn't want to dictate any one way to play the game because I believe they didn't really see the game as having any one way that would be the most effective or fun at the time. So the tutorial not including any high concept ideas makes a lot of sense. But dear viewer, it is no longer 2016. We are now 8 years removed from the initial launch of Overwatch, and I would argue that we have definitely figured out how to be the most effective at playing this game. The onboarding process needs to be improved to get the most people on track of our level of understanding. Now, there is an argument to be made that overloading new players with too many high-level concepts will turn them off to it, as it's just too overwhelming. But if these resources are tied to player curiosity, I think there will be a lot more success. Take any modern fighting game, for example. I'm gonna go ahead and look at Street Fighter 6. Fighting games are an infamously hard genre to get into on the surface, but the decades of iterations have resulted in very good, robust learning tools. A classic thing you will see is breaking down different systems and concepts individually so you can interact with what you think you need to know. If you already understand the concept of a wake-up DP, you can skip it and focus on something new like the drive reversal, which I've never actually done in a match. Fun fact, I suck at this game. They are also organized by difficulty so a new player can stick with the basic concepts while they find a character that works for them. Speaking of characters, Street Fighter has individual tutorials that help you practice your inputs while also giving you information on the applications for your moves and the general strategy of your character. Overwatch has hero mastery, but let's be real, these are really for squeezing the most value out of a character as opposed to learning them. And they also don't really provide any inherent value for the actual game of Overwatch. These are fun challenges for people wanting to seek them out. Street Fighter, however, gives you all the tools at the beginning, but also allows you to engage with them at your own pace. If something like this was added to Overwatch, not only would this help new players find comfort characters much faster, it also encourages them to branch out as they play and learn new characters and potentially new roles. Now, I will say, this is a lot of work, but I do think this will help player retention a lot. A player is much more likely to engage with more aspects of the game, and even in the community, if there is the proper curiosity driven by the in-game experience. They don't have to be that in depth. I don't want to get rid of tips and tricks videos on YouTube. Don't worry, CarQ, I'm thinking about you. I'm always thinking about you. Like when you suggested the game should have an easy to access glossary about important terms. I think that's also a great resource to reference. The dev team have also shown through balance changes and developer updates that they have an understanding of how the game generally plays, and more importantly, how the player base at large plays it. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility now that they would acknowledge higher level concepts like space or kiting, just to name a few. I would love to see even just bare bones versions of these features and see how players feel about them, because I genuinely believe it would help a lot. It would also give us plenty of stuff to make videos about when they inevitably get a couple of things wrong. Now, the other half of this video is about a pain point the developers have actively tried to alleviate to the joy of some and the dismay of others: team play. Let me make myself clear here, the idea of teamwork is obviously not the problem. Much of this game's allure comes from coordinating and executing plans with your teammates. And to be honest with you, saying that team play is the problem is definitely a misnomer. It's really more about playing around your teammates. Take organized play out of the picture here for a second. When you and 4 other random players load into a lobby, you are all expected to be on relatively the same page to win the game. This is not a problem, every team game works like this. But in Overwatch, roles aren't as individual as something like a MOBA or even a tac shooter. You don't have your own lane or a specific job that you branch out from as the game progresses. What you do at any one time is much more dynamic than most other games on the market. This is where Overwatch's emphasis on team fights, and by extension, team play, comes from. But what this does is skew too much of the team's success into every single person doing their individual part, or the game is lost. I understand this sounds like something that's like, well, duh, of course. But think about something like League. For most of the match, you will be staying in your lane and focusing on your individual play. If your top laner is feeding their brains out and hard losing that lane, you can still make up for it by playing your job well and winning your lane. Sure, the game will be harder, but you don't really have to change much of how you're playing to make up for their shortcoming. Also, this is just from observation. I've only barely played League, so eat me up in the comments if this isn't really true. And also, I understand that like snake drafts and competitive bans make this a little lopsided because some lanes just become way harder than others, but that's kind of neither here nor there. But in Overwatch, if you have a teammate who is hard feeding, staggering every fight, never using their ult, or anything on that never-ending complaint list, it impacts the team's success a lot and at a much higher frequency. We are all trying to coordinate as a team, yet when one person is completely on the wrong page, the game plan has to change around them to find success. And there is no right answer to this. You can change your positioning, your tempo, your characters, you name it, but you have to make up for their shortcomings somehow. And this will often cause you to play suboptimally just to play around these shortcomings, where you have to give up certain advantages to regain the value of having a fifth teammate. If I want to hold a door and hold aggressive, but my healers cannot see me, I no longer can hold that door anymore because I don't have the resources to stay there. Even if that is the correct play, it can no longer be because my team is not set up for it. This is unlike League, where if you're doing your job and carrying someone, your character will literally get stronger and your impact can be felt way more than theirs by the end of the game. This is not just a rant about having horrible teammates. I promise I have a point here. That being that your individual agency often gets removed when playing Overwatch on ladder for reasons completely out of your control. And the Overwatch team have noticed this. Many of the changes that have been made have attempted to emphasize the individual more than the team to offset these problems. Many of the initial 5v5 changes were designed around allowing all characters and roles to make more plays and allow them to win in more ways. With one less player on the battlefield, there was a fear that losing one person early would result in more teamfight stomps, and giving every character a way to offset their weaknesses a little was a way to give the individual more room to work. Of course, mix that with the removal of lots of damage mitigation from the other tank, and early Overwatch 2 felt pretty good in my opinion. Giving each person a bit more tools and a little more power allows them to take the game into their own hands, but there is still lots of depth in an organized setting. This is when Overwatch is at its best. But as we all know, this is not where the Overwatch 2 changes ended. I don't want to derail this video and dissect every single larger system changes that have been made to Overwatch, but there is an opinion that many of these changes have lowered Overwatch's skill ceiling. The healing over time passive, the projectile size increase, and even the recent wave spawn resystem have all had their fair share of criticism claiming that they dumbed down the game. And for the most part, yeah, that kinda is the case. Let's ignore organized play for a second here again and take a look at some of these changes. The global health passive is great as it doesn't require a teammate to heal you up and actually opens up more aggressive plays as you don't have to return to your core or grab a health bag to get back up to full, thus increasing your uptime. The wave respawn is a little more controversial, but it again gets the game back on track even with a player who is hard trolling and allows you to have more team fights, which is what Overwatch is all about. Does it remove some of the skill of not staggering and somewhat reward poor play? Yeah, but I think it does help give your team a fighting chance when you have a player who's doing their best to make you lose the game. When I play on ladder, the expectation is that if I play well, I will win the game. But very often there are games that you just cannot win no matter what you do because of the other people on your team. You would have to play so far above your level in order to claw it back that it just isn't realistic. That is where the difficulty becomes too skewed. So adding systems that soften the blow for the parts of the team that you cannot control is, on paper, not a bad idea. And to be clear, there are going to be some games you are just never going to win. It is going to happen regardless, but minimizing the losses that feel completely out of your control is definitely a good thing. In my opinion, what Overwatch asks of a team of random players to do together is kind of ridiculous. There is no one way to play a team fight, no one right comp to pick, no one right individual play. So then expecting players to all coordinate when they all have their own idea of how the game plays will lead to really lopsided experiences. A world where you at very least have more fighting chances to adapt and win the game is a good thing. But in practice, I also don't really agree with lowering the skill ceiling to accomplish this. These changes continually impact high-level play no matter how positive they may be for the larger community. But I don't think that this super small subset of people should determine the entire experience for everybody else. So what can we do about this? Well, why does professional and organized play have to be exactly the same as it is on ladder? I think that there are different ideals that you can follow depending on if you are on ladder or in organized play. Why can't we have some of the old systems in OWCS? For example, what if we determine that we don't want wave respawn, we don't want ult retention, and maybe we don't even want increased projectile sizes? It can really be anything, although that last one is probably not technically possible to be honest with you, but whatever, right? The professional players and the people who play in organized play can make their own environment because it is completely separate from ladder and the majority of other players. So if they determine something to not be as skillful or competitively rewarding, then it doesn't have to be in that version of the game that they play. We still get the highest level Overwatch that we possibly can, while allowing the main game to be as playable and fun for the most amount of people as well. Now I understand that most people aren't pros, and some people, like old heads or higher ranked players, would potentially still want to play with these changes. If Blizzard ever introduced an in-client tournament system, they could work just like professional play, and then the masses could get access to that version of the game. Since you would always be playing with people you know, you don't need to compensate for randoms. Now, these are all solutions assuming the dev team want to continue to make changes like they have been. But I want them to lean more towards the initial idea of individual playmaking in Overwatch 2. Many of the recent changes to passives and tanks and health have made individual playmaking feel worse since it's harder to interact with any individual character. I don't want to open that whole can of worms, but bringing inherent power like health and passives down across the board would bring back a lot of that playmaking potential and would, at least I think, somewhat solve some of these problems I've brought up. I want Overwatch to be fun and skillful no matter how you play, and I think there are lots of ways you can do that. The dev team just have to commit to it. I don't want it to be an easy game, I still want it to have as much depth and nuance as possible. But sometimes I think we should remove things that are technically skillful, but are very unintuitive and honestly not even very fun when you do the right thing. like the change about being able to swap spawns when points are taken. I saw many reactions that were negative, saying that it removed part of the skill of staggering. But do you really think it's gratifying when someone spawns in half a second before the change and you can just get a free kill because there's actually nowhere they can go to avoid it? Absolutely not, in my opinion. They died early, and the punishment is that they lost their team the fight. It shouldn't also be that they die again and basically lose the team another 20 plus seconds. That's just overly punishing, and I think that was a really good change that makes the game frankly more fun because you get to have more full fights, which is the whole point of Overwatch. If I wanted to be overly punished for small mistakes, I'd play attack shooter or something that's much more ingrained into those games' identity. And maybe that too is a change that could be removed for professional play. Who knows? It is just determined by that community. I've been playing Overwatch for a very, very long time, and I love it, warts and all. I want this to be the best game it can possibly be, but I want everyone to be able to experience it in the best way possible. I think that there is work to be done, and I definitely have my opinions about how they can accomplish it, but I do think that maybe there's a world where the game functions differently depending on how much you really want to engage with it. Everyone will have their own version of how the game should function, so what if there are effectively different versions of the game to get them closer to their ideal goal? There are still plenty of things to consider, like splitting queues too hard, and frankly splitting the player base, but I think people would like more ways to appreciate the larger game of Overwatch. So whether the difficulty comes from not knowing what to do because you aren't taught, or not knowing what to do because you can't control any of your teammates, Overwatch has a lot of growth in the difficulty department. Hopefully in a year or so, this video will be worthless, but for now, thank you for listening to me yap. And if you're fuming, you're jumping out of your seat, you don't know what to do with your anger and rage, channel it in my comment section. What do you think about this video? What do you think about the things that I proposed here? And also, maybe you aren't as mad, maybe you're a little more calm, cool, and collected, and you want to give some more ideas about what could be changed, anything like that. I'd love to hear back from you guys. I always do. Like and subscribe while you're at it. I do really appreciate all the support I've been getting. I wanted to make a goal for myself to hit 1,000 subs by the end of the year, and to be honest with you, looking at my numbers, I think that is pretty reasonable, and honestly, it might even happen before like the end of October or something if all goes well. So if you guys would continue to do that stuff, I would really appreciate it. I also stream live, twitch.tv/LaneHemingway. That's Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. I always like to do these kind of discussions live on stream, so there's always something to talk to me about in real time. And feel free to join my Discord if you have any hot takes, replay codes for me to look at, rework ideas, general Overwatch talk that you want to talk about. Anything like that, there's a community in there. I'm sure somebody will talk to you. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching. Please have a good day.